Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. There was a famous marshmallow experiment at Stanford in the 1970s that you may have heard of. 4- and 5-year-old children were left alone with a marshmallow and told that if they did not eat it, they would be rewarded with a second marshmallow in a few minutes. The experiment was designed to measure the ability of the children to delay gratification, and then to make correlations with the children's future success. One conclusion that came from this study was that children who came from homes where they could count on the pantry being full were better able to delay gratification. Those who knew hunger were apt to eat the marshmallow right away. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. The promise of less is preferable to the possibility of more. In today's Old Testament reading, the first temple has fallen, and the Jewish people have been cast out of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. They are not in a good spot, and they are harboring deep, deep doubts about this God of theirs. God had overlooked them for years, for generations, and cast them aside. This is captured in verse 27 when the prophet says, "My way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by God." Having acknowledged their pain, the prophet seeks to convince those Jewish folks and us of 2 things. First, that God, the Creator, is really powerful, that He is an everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not grow faint or weary. His understanding is unsearchable. This is a powerful God. And second, the prophet tries to reassure us that there is great power available to the weak and the weary and for those who wait. We expect a God who protects the weak and the weary. We see this in the work of Jesus throughout the Gospels. Indeed, in today's reading, Jesus heals Simon's mother-in-law by taking her by the hand and lifting her up. That same day, he proceeded to heal all who were sick throughout the city. That's the God we know, that heals us, that helps the weak and the weary. It's the waiting that's the rub. It's not just an Old Testament rub either. How can our God, who promises to protect the most vulnerable, stand by and allow the faithful to suffer? And there's so much suffering in our world. He does not heal each of our mothers and our mother-in-laws. How could a God have stood by while generations of American slaves suffered, only to allow that suffering to continue through centuries of discrimination and continued apartheid? God made promises to us, and so often, so many of those promises appear to be unfulfilled. How do we reconcile that gulf between the promised and the fulfilled? This is the great rhetorical lift in the poetic prophecy contained in today's Old Testament reading, to instill faith that God's promises will be realized, even if God is playing the long game. Isaiah tells us, "But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." In waiting, we can attain strength that exceeds the vigor of youth. That sounds pretty good. In waiting, we can go the distance and reach our salvation. As Michael Chan, the director of faith and learning at Concordia College, observed, hopeful waiting is deeply important to Christian practice. Christians exist within a long season of waiting between Christ's resurrection and the promised second coming. In the interim, we find ourselves facing the realities of a deeply flawed world filled with human sin, faithfully believing that the promise that God will one day make this world just, and perhaps even a little more joyful. So how does this apply to my time here with you? Oh, yeah, sorry. Good Samaritan has been in a period of transition. Since 2020, you have made 4 major transitions. Gray left, Beth arrived, Beth left, Father Jim arrived. Although not quite on the scale of Jews being exiled from Jerusalem, the promise of new beginnings and stability have been unrealized to date. This is not to say that God has not been amongst you. I see God everywhere at Good Sam's. I see it in the faithful diligence of your bishop's committee, in your newly formed discernment committee. I see it in Father Jim's care for each of you. I see it in the community showing up to the cottage conversations to imagine what the village hub could be. I see it in Barbie's care for our youngest who have gone away and have their own time together right now, and in the abundant love that I see each of you show for each other. God is here. And yet, it has been a period of hopeful waiting, hasn't it? Today, we begin the next step of a metaphorical return to Jerusalem. We will gather after church to share your stories of what you value about being part of the Good Samaritan community, and to understand a bit more about where you fit within the Anglican community. In the first of 3 holy conversations, designed to help the discernment committee to hear from you about how God is calling Good Sam's to serve in this broken world of ours. It will be an opportunity for you to hear stories from each other and to come to understand Good Sam's a bit better. As our reading asked this morning, how have you not known? How have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Not all of you were here when Good Sam's was created and opened, 8 years ago? Do I have that right? 7, 8? 7? 7 years ago? Not all of you know all the things. Not all of you have heard all the stories. This is the opportunity to hear the stories that go back to the beginning. Over the 3 holy conversations, you will all have an opportunity to take stock of who you are, understand where you've come from, understand some of the areas in which you have fallen short, and to celebrate all the amazing works and the love of this community. God blesses those who wait faithfully. Good Sam's has waited with great hope. Having been so well nourished and cared for in the past, you have been able to delay gratification. A second marshmallow and perhaps 2 birds await you. Amen.